Hi guys, how are you all? This is FJ What If? Today we are going to discuss about what if Naruto was Madara's student part 9. Before start the episode, please like and subscribe my channel. Chapter 9, Beasts. Enraged would not be the correct word to describe how angry she was. She had already heard the news about another infiltration in the village. She had lost one of her most promising shinobi. And the Chunin and the newly promoted Jonin standing in front of her. Guilty and disappointed were the words to describe them. It wasn't a day ago did she lose the Aburame clan heir, Shino, to the person Choji was calling the Dancing Phantom. It was like the Yoke's incident barely 2 months ago. However, the problem was she and nobody else knew the identity of this Dancing Phantom. And also since he took on Shikamaru, Neji, Choji, Tenten, Lee, Kiba and Akamaru and Shino all at once meant he was powerful, possibly low cage. Also, this man had an unheard of summoning contract. Bats, she had never heard of such a contract. And how did he get into the village without being detected? Ryuyoke simply waltzed into the village while this man appeared. Like a phantom. But what made it suspicious was the fact that it happened after Yokes penetrated their defenses. Could the dragon's footprints be attracting pests? Could this be the first of possibly many infiltrations into the village by their rivals and enemies? She pressed her fingers into her temples in frustration. This could be a beacon for other villages to attack. She has to contain the situation before they are threatened with war. What happened must never see the light of day. She turned her scrutinizing gaze on the two shinobi before her. Their heads were hung low and guilt was etched into their eyes. Tell me what happened in every detail. Now. Threatened Tsunade, who leaked a small amount of killer intent. Neji and Shikamaru explained in detail what had happened before, during and after their fight. Tsunade listened intently, her eyes were narrowed throughout the explanation. She was told of the man's abilities and prowess along with his fighting style, and she made a silent comment that says, the weapon were an unusual choice for combat, and since the person displayed mastery of them he was efficient in their use. From what she was able to piece together of this individual, she noted an uncanny resemblance in combat between him and Ryuyoke's. However, it couldn't have been him since the man's clothes didn't match the description of Ryuyoke's, who wore samurai-like armor. This man wore a black cloak with silver drawstrings along with black gloves and boots. She sighed inwardly. She couldn't place this man in the bingo book. It may make Konoha look weak, and the last thing she needed was enemy ninja flaunting into her village, and if Danzo got wind of it he may use the opportunity to oust her as Hokage. Sei had to keep it under wraps. She was going to inform the shinobi who had faced the Dancing Phantom to not utter a word of what happened, but she couldn't keep it from Shibuya Aburame, Shino's father. She would have to create a false cause of death, and she would need Shibi's help. She focused her attention on Shikamaru and Neji once she had finished finalizing what she was going to do. What were you two thinking? Snarled/questioned Tsunade. Shikamaru and Neji didn't answer. They didn't have the courage to look her in the eye. When this person infiltrated the village, it was to be brought to my attention immediately. Neji hung his head down further. He blamed himself for Shino's death because it was his plan to confront the assailant. We could have taken appropriate steps and formulated a plan to capture him. But no, you charged in without any assessment of the infiltrator's abilities, especially you, Shikamaru. Continued Tsunade. He looked at Shikamaru. I expected better from you. Given your shinobi record, you have the best analyzing ability among your graduating class, where you are able to form correct strategies against your opponents, and yet you didn't use any strategy against this man. In fact, why didn't you think through all the possibilities of the outcome? You should have foreseen what would have happened. And you're not in the clear either, Neji. Neji turned her head to the side in disappointment. You're a newly promoted Jonin, so I expected more from you. As a Jonin, you are responsible for the safety and lives of your comrades and fellows in arms. You were the team leader, so everything that has happened is because of you. I would have much preferred if this Dancing Phantom escaped without killing anyone. If it wasn't for the arrival for Kurena and the other shinobi among her, you could have all died. Reprimanded Tsunade. But I guess I expected too much from the both of you, and now you have lost yet another comrade and friend. Spoke Tsunade. Both of you, hand me Yuhaitayats, commanded Tsunade. They both nodded at her order, fully understanding that punishment for their actions were needed. Neji removed his and showcased the bird cage seal on his forehead, while Shikamaru pulled out his Haitai-8 from his uniform where it was sewed into. You are both suspended from active shinobi duty. For a month, you are permitted to train your skills, though if you leave the village, you will be sentenced for treason and insubordination. Threatened Tsunade. Both nodded and left the room, leaving Tsunade alone. It was necessary both failed to inform her of the intruder, and if they did so, she could have formulated a plan to capture the man and extract any information he had, and it could have been quick and quiet and no casualties. She knew that death was required from a shinobi, but to have her own shinobi die in her village was something else entirely. She massaged her temples in frustration and anger. She had faced Hanzo of the Salamander, a man recognized to be one of the most powerful shinobi to grace the world, where because of their teamwork and strategies did she, Orochimaru and Drea survive. If she had faced him alone and if they were a coherent team, then the Sannin would have fallen in battle and everyone would have forgotten about them. She also had another problem to deal with, and Kakashi was right. There was a silent uproar from half the civilian population who refused to believe that Naruto was the Yondaime son, and most if not all migrated to the hospital to stroke their arrogant ego. They had tried to find evidence that she was wrong, but of course they found the opposite, and even still their views hadn't changed. They still regarded him as the demon. Was this really the village that her grandfather and Madara Uchiha envisioned? Was this the village that the previous Hokage had fought and died for? Minato had sacrificed his son's life and happiness for the village, and he would do so again in a heartbeat. What her sensei said about the will of fire true? Was what Orochimaru said about the village and its ideals, was the fallen Sannin right? Was the will of fire dwindling into an ember? What were her shinobi fighting for? They abandoned one of their own, to a traitor who was rooted in his clan's cursed lineage, and yet that traitor didn't care about the village at all, and yet to this day, they still praise him. Then there was trouble with 3 council families dropping dead. Their funerals would be held later that day. Although she was silently happy that Mauricio Almeida and his family were gone. The fat bastard had what was coming to him, and that god-awful painting he had was enough reason to kill him. She also assumed that the dancing phantom killed him and the other council families. Maybe that was the reason why. Shino would have a silent funeral, his body would be cremated so the village and his clan's secrets wouldn't fall into their enemies' paws. Tsunade turned her chair around and faced the village as was her hobby. And it was raining again. It just seemed to rain more when Naruto died. But why? Tsunade then felt this dark feeling welling up inside her, as if something very bad was going to happen and she would be powerless to stop it. It wasn't fear, she knew that, and it wasn't anger, and neither was it hatred. It was unease. She could literally feel as if something horrible was going to happen and that it would affect everyone in the village. But this feeling, it was like someone familiar setting fire to her house. So why? She opened one of her drawers and took out a betting slip. She had a hunch, and this was the only way to prove it. And there it was, she had won, she got the lucky numbers. She now had plenty of money to gamble away. And not only that, she won every other betting slip in the draw. And with her luck, something horrific was going to happen. How come I feel like something is coming to us? I can feel yet I can't. It feels empty, as if there is no emotion or color. Something is coming and we will all suffer for it, thought Tsunade. In the mountain's graveyard. Inside a dark hovel was a man sitting on a stone, thrown with a cliff, facing him directly into an enormous lotus flower that rivaled mountains with its towering height. And atop the flower was a humongous decayed statue, with its hands bowed and sitting cross-legged. The man was wearing a black cloak with silver drawstrings, black gloves and black shoes with silver lining. The cloak was zipped up from its chin-height collar down to the man's waist. Both of his arms were resting on the throne's armrests. His hood was down, allowing everyone to see his glistening golden hair and his bloodthirsty red eyes. He was currently staring intensely at a peculiar branch that was growing from one of the flower's petals. It was a living clone of Madara Uchiha. The man had been cultivating it since before Madara's death. And with it the giant lotus tree would now spawn and grow black zetsus along with white zetsus by using the chakra extracted from his body that originally belonged to the Kyuubi. He kept staring at the strange clone of Madara. But his thoughts wasn't on the clone, but something else, a jutsu he found extremely infuriating. The Hiraishin, Flying Thunder God. One of the greatest jutsu to be developed in the world. Created by the Nidaime Hokage, Tobirama Senju, and perfected by the Yondaime Hokage, Minato Namikaze. The man sitting on his throne was Naruto Uzumaki, son of the Yondaime, Madara Uka's student. The most powerful person outside the Uchiha clan to wield the Sharingan and legitimate heir to the Uzumaki clan. He was mulling over the jutsu that gave his father the title of Kiroi Senko, Yellow Flash. The Hiraishin was a work of art in his mind, allowing the user to teleport himself to any marked location with a speed that surpassed lightning. You couldn't blink before you dropped dead from that jutsu. And yet the blonde Sharingan wielder was infuriated. It must have taken years for the Nidaime to create the jutsu and years more for his father to perfect it. And it would take years for Naruto just to learn it, and the one thing Naruto lacked most was patience. He hated waiting for something. He hated it when people paused in their speeches, or when they're out shopping for food, only to take up more time required before they picked what they wanted. However, since he lacked the patience to develop the jutsu, he was going to do something else. Create his own space-time ninjutsu. Already he was currently thinking about it. It was going to have the speed of the Hiraishin and the versatility of Obito's teleportation. He could see it now. Such a jutsu would be art in Deidara and Sasori's opinion. From his brief encounter with his teacher's fake and only seeing his teleportation twice, Naruto analyzed the technique and was able to tell that, even though it lacked speed like the Hiraishin, it was more versatile because it didn't require the location to be predetermined by a jutsu formula. So there he was staring at Madara's clone and planning his new jutsu. It would take some time, but he could always use that ability to be in two places at the same time, so he could think about it more. It was decided he would stay at his base and work on his space-time ninjutsu, and it also gave him a chance to meet with Kasami and another member of the Akatsuki. Zetsu, barked Naruto as he kept staring emotionlessly at the Madara statue. The black and white man materialized from the ground, appearing to the side of Naruto's throne. Yes, answered the plant man. Bring me a Zetsu clone, ordered Naruto. The multicolored Zetsu nodded his head at the blonde. He sent a silent signal to a random clone because all the Zetsus were linked mentally with each other. A random white Zetsu clone appeared from the ground, kneeling before Naruto. Raise your head, requested Naruto. The Zetsu did as it was told, but instead of the face of his master, he was met with a katana sliding through its mouth, killing it. Naruto held the Tanbaguri in his right hand as he stared emptily at the dead Zetsu. He placed his foot on the Zetsu's shoulder and hefted the sword from its body without little trouble. The body slumped forward and landed face first in the hard concrete floor. Naruto stabbed the Tanbaguri into the floor, and his eternal Mangekyo appeared, spinning around like a wheel. Bring me more corpses, Zetsu, commanded Naruto, and two more Zetsu appeared. Naruto gripped the Tanbaguri and decapitated the heads of the two Zetsu in one swing, their heads rolling on the ground like balls. And like before, Naruto's Mangekyo was spinning. I require your aid, Zetsu. I must develop this jutsu in a location without much space. Also contact Konan and tell her that my personal business will be delayed. And both left the mountain's graveyard, Zetsu fire melding with the ground and Naruto transforming into a cloud of bats. The blonde arrived at a small part of a forest with various trees coupled together, but yet were still wide enough for travel and acrobatic maneuvers. Kasami Hoshigaki, the Kirigakure no Kajin, monster of the hidden mist, was currently gorging himself on some shrimp and crab that he had brought while traveling through the land of grass with Itachi. He was currently sitting in a small seafood shop which was situated next to an inn. However, he was alone. He was fully aware that Itachi was suffering from an incurable disease that was slowly killing him, although he was able to extend his life with various medication and alchemical medicines. So Itachi was resting in their room at the inn. And he didn't have better timing since the sun was going down over the horizon, signaling the end of the day. Kasami could be described as a battle master. He loved fighting and wouldn't hesitate to start one when the opportunity presented itself, but a warning from Itachi would calm him down. When his thoughts traveled to the rest of the Akatsuki, he did like some members. He hated Haiden and his stupid religion. He liked Sasori for his equal thirst for combat, and he defeated the third Kazekage, not a bad feat, although he did have some help from Orochimaru. Deidara just simply annoyed him, especially when and Sasori got into an argument over whose art was greater than the others. Kasami hated art. Kekazu he also liked, for he didn't bother him and liked money, something which everyone, except Haiden, loved. Konan. He didn't know what to think of Konan. They rarely interacted, and if they did, it would only be a few short words. So he was neutral on with Konan. Zetsu. He didn't know what to think of Zetsu, the leader of the organization. He will admit in a heartbeat that he respected Pain, but like Konan he was neutral with him as well, considering the fact that he was a pawn of Obito's, someone Kasami was working with. And then there was Ryu, the person he liked the most next to Itachi. Ryu made him laugh, and despite the few times he talked with him at Akatsuki meetings, he liked his personality. And the way he made Haiden appear a fool. And yet Kasami could sense that Ryu was incredibly strong. The only way to test how strong the wolf was for the shark and the wolf battle it out. Kasami then felt a presence sitting in front of him on an opposite chair across from him. When he looked up, a man wearing a black cloak with silver drawstrings, with black gloves and shoes with silver lining. His hood was up, obscuring most of his face except for his chin, mouth and nose. "Do you want something?" asked Kasami, who was clearly agitated. "Yes, I do want something," answered the person. He pulled down his hood, revealing golden blonde, spiky hair which was patterned in a low ponytail with bandages wrapping around half the ponytail. He had chin-length hair framing the sides of his face, and some fell between his eyes, which were narrow and slightly rounded. He had a defined jaw line and his face was slightly round. However, he had a pair of Sharingan eyes in his sockets, the same eyes as Itachi. The eyes that shrouded darkness and reflected hatred. It didn't take Kasami long to figure out who it was, but the person looked familiar also, but it couldn't be that person since he was dead, so there was only one answer. "Ryuyoke's, good to see you," greeted Kasami, who was grinning, exposing his shark-like teeth. To be honest, he never expected his fellow Akatsuki member to see him. "Hello Kasami, how has your day been?" asked Ryu politely. "Don't see how you're interested, and besides, skip to the point. What do you want?" questioned Kasami. Given his many experience with other shinobi, Kasami had a second sense where he could feel that someone wanted something from him. So like always, he skipped the hello bullshit and got onto the main course. "You're quite astute," complimented Naruto. At that moment, a waitress came over to serve Naruto. He ordered for some green tea, which wouldn't take long to arrive. So a few minutes passed in utter silence. Kasami was still eating the shrimp and crab while Ryu was waiting for his order. So now we find ourselves with Naruto sipping on some green tea and Kasami patiently waiting for him. "I know everything about you, Kasami," started Naruto. The shark-like man didn't know if he should scowl or feel violated. "I know about what you did during the bloodline purges. I also know that you were approached by a person, claiming to be someone he isn't," continued Naruto. Kasami widened his eyes a little. "Trust me when I say this, the person you're working with is a nothing but a bitter loser who thinks he can parade around with a name he can't live up to." Kasami narrowed his eyes at Naruto. What was this guy insinuating? And as if reading his mind, Naruto continued speaking. "After you killed Fuyuki Suikazan, you were approached by the Yandai Mizukage, who applauded you for eliminating a traitor and protecting your village. However, the Yandai was merely a puppet. You were merely approached by the puppet master through his toy," spoke Naruto with deep authority. Kasami widened his eyes a little at the information. "And I will warn you now, that man is not who he claims to be. You may think he is who he says he is, but he's used your own beliefs to sway you to his cause. What do you expect he will do once he's finished with his plans?" queried Naruto. Kasami didn't answer straight away, but he contemplated it for a while. And there was some truth to what Yosuke was saying. Tobi wished to create weapon that would wash away all lies in the world, or that was what he told Kasami, but the shark man could always sense some ulterior motive to Tobi. He just couldn't place his finger on it. He had been known the world to be filled with lies and false promises from many that he trusted, but he was led astray every time. He finally cracked under the pressure when he killed Fuyuki. Tobi had given him a choice and he decided to follow. But the masked man promised him the end of all lies. Was that also an empty promise? Was Tobi lying to him? "He's going to betray you," stated Naruto, gaining Kaisam's attention. The shark man looked up and saw his associate sipping on his green tea. "The one you're working with, his name is Obito Uchiha. He's going to betray you." He placed his cup down and poured some more green tea. "And he's nothing more than a bitter loser who got friend-zoned and now wishes everybody to feel his anger by creating a weapon using the power of the tailed beasts, where everybody would live in terror and lies and betrayal would be more rampant," spoke Naruto. "He's a mere child throwing a temper tantrum. He refuses to see truth, and his anger grows by the day. You're nothing more than his tool, and once you're broken, he will discard you like any other broken toy," spoke Naruto, sipping his tea. He looked Kasami straight in the eye, casting a silent genjutsu on him. A genjutsu designed to extract information from the target. Any information Kasami had on Obito would be known to the blonde. "So Obito, you have natures connected to fire and earth. Release, master of genjutsu, considerable skill in bukijutsu and weapon skills, some skill in sealing, nowhere near my own, high chakra reserves clearly above Kage, experienced in taijutsu, a space-time ninjutsu unlike any other called Kamui." Not much information after that, thought Naruto. He sipped on his tea in victory. Why your minus, stuttered Kasami as what Ryu said contrasted with everything he knew about Toby, and yet it sounded true. There were no lies sprouting from his lips. Wrong, replied Naruto. You can say that. For now, said Naruto. Kasami, this world is sick, fettered with a disease known as hatred. I wish to rid the disease by creating a world where there is none of that, a perfect world where betrayal and deceit never exist. There would only be truth and love and nothing else will corrupt those pure things, spoke Naruto. What makes you think I should believe or trust you? Accused Kasami as he narrowed his eyes. But Naruto's emotionless visage didn't reveal anything. Because of one simple fact, replied Ryu. I am Madara Uchiha, whispered Naruto. You have blonde hair, deadpanned Kasami, who got over his stupor rather quickly. And you have blue skin and gills. So even if you are Madara, how do I know I can still trust you? Because the other guy said he was Madara as well, spoke Kasami, who was sporting a grin, for he was finding this enjoyable. For this guy's prospect sounded better than Obito's, and he was hoping to get a fight out of it. He adored fighting and he wanted to see Ryu fight, considering all the hype about the guy that's been going around. How about a bet? Suggested Naruto, gaining Kaisam's interest. We have a battle, no rules, no restrictions, no interferences, just a one-on-one fight between the two of us. Kasami grinned. He didn't know whether to believe Ryu or not. How about we add some more money to the pot? Responded Kasami. If you win, I'll join your plan and abandon that obi whatever, and if I win, well, I don't really want anything other than to feed your chakra to Samehada, spoke Kasami. Very well, spoke Naruto. Let's have this fight in an hour. There is a clearing not far from here. It's not too small, and it's large enough to sport our battle, while it's far enough from here that it won't attract attention. Kasami nodded and Naruto left within a cloud of bats, leaving Kasami alone in the seafood shop, where he was left with the bill for his and Naruto's orders. Meanwhile, another Naruto was standing in a forest with the main body of Zetsu standing adjacent from him. So what will this jutsu do? Asked Zetsu. Naruto stared at Zetsu, which unnerved the plant man. This jutsu will take the limits of time to its greatest point. Teleporting something to you is easy, teleporting yourself is another annoying hurdle. This jutsu will literally make time bend to my will. I already have the idea for it now, I just need to employ it, clarified Naruto. Zetsu seemed to almost sigh. Whenever Naruto had an idea for a jutsu, he wouldn't stop until it's completed and mastered. And he still had his stubbornness from his time as a Jinchuriki. He was stubborn like a rock and wouldn't give up if he set his mind to something. I will use the Hiraishin and Obito's Kamui as bases. The Hiraishin's speed and Kamui's versatility will be major factors, and the Ryouden no Yoroi, lightning release armor, provides the general concept and appearance of the technique. Continued Naruto as Zetsu let everything sink in. Naruto started gathering his chakra, forming a shield around his body, and it was in such large quantities that it was visible. This was going to take some time. A jutsu on a scale such as this will take years to create and develop. What Naruto was showcasing to Zetsu was the initial development of the technique. He had just started the concept. He would focus his chakra around his surroundings and do something. Zetsu silently watched as Naruto cloaked himself in chakra. And quickly Naruto cut off the flow. Black Zetsu could already see what the blonde was up to. And suddenly Zetsu heard a Taju Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, yelled Naruto as he formed the signature, created a multitude of shadow clones, and each started working on the shields. First they would practice with their chakra cloaks and be able to simultaneously the cloaks off and on without much thought, and would become second nature. This is going to take a while, spoke White Zetsu. Yep. While in Konohagakure, someone was wallowing in sorrow. She had pitch black hair and crimson eyes. She was currently being comforted by two others, Asuma Sarutobi and Hinata Hyuga. This person's name is Kurena Yui. Why was she crying? She had just watched one of her beloved students be killed before her eyes. He was brutally murdered and within his home village. Shino was a valued member of the team. He was also the thinker of the group, always coming up with clever plans to fool and outwit his enemies. He was also support, and his insects were ingenious for capture and espionage along with tracking. She questioned many times why the Aburame died. She felt guilty because she couldn't reach him in time. The man in the black cloak was too fast and his moves were like lightning to her. She was currently wondering on how Shibi Aburame was doing. Most Aburame hid their emotions excellently. You could never tell what they were feeling, but Kurena, she just knew that Shibi was grieving and also thinking about revenge. Revenge. She wanted that so much. To kill the person that took her student away from her. She wanted to give the man a painful death and she wanted to watch every second of it. Though remembering what happened to Sasuke Uchiha, she knew that killing the man won't lessen the pain in her heart. But if it hurt Shino's murderer, would it matter? Kirena was currently sitting at her table with Asuma next to her in a chair and Hinata sitting adjacent from her. Kirena, spoke Asuma Sarutobi, who was rubbing her shoulder gently so to comfort her as he watched the silent tears flow down her cheeks. You need to accept what happened and move on. He's our right, Kirena-sensei, spoke Hinata, who was currently wondering where Kiba was because she suspected he'd want to be here. But Hinata was also trying to get over her sadness at seeing her teammate and friend die. She had become good friends with Shino and to find out he was just gone broke her. You two didn't see it, said Kirena, who sounded like a broken violin. You didn't see his blood splatter across the ground, spoke Kirena grimly as a few drops of salty liquid dropped from her chin. Asuma sighed heavily. He couldn't emphasize with her because none of his students were dead. Hinata looked to the ground sadly. Maybe if she had been there she could have helped. Maybe she could have saved Shino and stopped the black-cloaked man. She stopped thinking about the what-if scenarios, knowing that it was causing more pain. I just need to be left alone for a while, spoke Kirena quietly. Kirena, said Asuma. Leave, she shouted as his tears became more frantic. Asuma nodded and Hinata left with him. Kirena was now alone, and she poured her anguish in wails of sorrow and sobs. If only she had gotten there sooner. Kiba was currently sitting in a bar, drowning his sorrows in alcohol. Like Kirena, he too was suffering. Shino was one of his greatest friends despite how weird the guy was. Akamaru was by his side and was currently pawing at his leg to get his attention. The dog understood his partner's pain, but somehow the dog was smarter, knowing that this wasn't the way to get over what happened. Kiba brought a bottle of sake to his lips and drowned a large volume of the drink in an audible gulp. The bartender didn't want to interrupt the young man. For one, the Inuzuka were known to have bad tempers, and two, he wanted the kid to drown out his troubles, even though he was underage for drinking. Hey buddy. More sake and make it snappy, barked Kiba. The barkeep nodded and got out another bottle of sake and placed it in front of Kiba, who took the drink and started guzzling down the alcoholic beverage. He could feel the burning down his throat as the drink dove down to his stomach. He knew he was going to have a massive hangover, but he didn't care at the time. He felt a presence next to him, so he turned his head to the left to see Shibuya Barame, Shino's father, sitting next to him. Kiba, spoke Shibuya in his monotone voice. Kiba, being around Shino for years, could tell his emotions through the patterns of his voice. And Kiba knew instantly that Shiba was depressed, which was uncharacteristic of the Abarame clan. Hey Shibi-sama, greeted Kiba despondently as he turned back to his drink. Akamaru meanwhile was still trying to get Kiba's attention through whines and clawing at his leg. I don't blame you for what happened to Shino, spoke Shibi, making Kiba look at him with his eyes widened a little. The Hokage informed me of what happened. Kiba sighed wearily. The Inuzuka heir almost died at the hands of Ryuyoke's. And he almost died at the Dancing Phantom's palms. In fact, he should consider himself lucky to be alive if it wasn't for reinforcements arriving. Yet how come he didn't feel relieved? He should be happy, but also he felt guilty, and he was now questioning whether he should have died in Shino's place. Kiba had never been so thoroughly outclassed in his life. The black-cloaked man was merely toying with them except for the few hits Lee scored. Even after 2 years of training and missions with his had done nothing. After his loss to Naruto during his first Chunin exam, he wanted to get stronger, to defeat his self-appointed rival, but since Naruto's death, why was he getting stronger? Did he have a purpose anymore other than to let his comrades die? Kiba. This, spoke Shibi, gesturing to the sake bottle in Kiba's hand. Won't lessen the pain and it won't bring Shino back minus and just. Then Shibi's voice broke. Kiba then thought he saw what appeared to be a tear. And Kiba couldn't fault the man for it. He had cried earlier before he came to the pub to wash away his sorrow. What I'm trying to say is, Kiba, do you want to spend the rest of your days looking down at the bottom of a glass? Or will you change yourself for the better, so something like this won't happen again? Spoke Shibi with wisdom. Kiba soaked everything in like a sponge. There was something true to what Shibi was saying, but he lost his train of thought when he heard a loud crash coming from the entrance of the pub. Kiba, you lazy bum, Stop moping around and do something productive and become stronger so to avenge your creepy friend. Came the screeching voice of Tsume Inuzuka, who in some unknown way found out about Shino's death, and it will remain forever an unanswered question of the universe. Mahin, it is not creepy, roared Kiba, who had clearly misheard her. No, you idiot. Not the weird stalker, the nasty bug boy, screeched Tsume, who had yet to notice Shibi sitting next to Kiba. Seriously, I hate bugs. If only I had a bigger boot, then I can crush them all, mumbled Tsume. Shibi sweat dripped at the loud woman. Everything he wanted to say to Kiba was explained in Tsume's original sentence, although he did question her methods about getting it across. And why did she hate insects? Tsume stomped her way up towards her idiot son while she was grinding her teeth. Kiba's depressing attitude had been making her depressed even though she didn't show it. However, she stopped when she noticed the sake bottles next to Kiba and in his hand. She cocked back the palm of her hand and in one swift motion launched it at the back of her son's head, where audible smack was heard as Kiba was temporarily knocked unconscious. Although to many parents that was her way of punishing and disciplining Kiba when he did something stupid. Shibi, who had watched everything from the sidelines, sweat dripped at the scene. He wasn't sure if he should be scared or confused. Tsume grabbed the collar of Kiba's black jacket and started swinging him around like a rag doll while Kiba was utterly dazed from his mother's love. I didn't raise a wimp so he can just mope around when one of his friends gets squashed, continued Tsume, and her analogy between bugs and her boot. Now let's go. Where? Squeaked Kiba as he regained consciousness and was now being pulled out of the pub by the back of his collar as he was dragged out of the building. To go training, moron, yelled Tsume. Ikamaru chased after his partner and his mother, barking all the way. Shibi was left alone until the barkeep came back. So are you going to pay for the kids' drinks? Asked the bartender. And suddenly Shibi got depressed again. Sasarai and his partner Didoro were currently traversing through the land of hot water. They had just finished a mission for a snobbish daio in eliminating some pesky nobles with their rich wealth. He had to wait 10 months until he and Didoro started hunting the Jinchuriki. But he had to wait even more, for the Kyuubi was still coalescing into a complete being. And if there was one thing that Sasarai loathed with his being was waiting. The puppet master was notorious for being annoyingly impatient. He hated when people paused in their speeches and when they couldn't make up their mind about something. But he hated when would take their time in trying to attack him. And because of his age, Sasarai was an experienced shinobi who could identify certain shinobi from their abilities. He could still remember his greatest battle in his now eternal existence. His battle with the Sandaime Kazekage. The Kazekage was the toughest opponent the redhead had faced. His intelligence in creating the iron sand from his studies of the Ichibi no Tanyakai. The iron sand had completely decimated the puppets Sasarai had collected over the years. And he had to complement the Sandaime. He was a genius. The iron sand was a work of art, and now it was a part of Sasarai's art. After a long battle, Sasarai was able to kill the Sandaime with specific poison the missing nin had concocted. And Sasarai turned his body into his most beloved puppet and greatest work of art. Sasarai, my man, there's an inn up ahead, and since it's getting late we should book a room for the night. After all, wouldn't your dolls be getting, I don't know, creaky and unartistic? Grunted Didoro, trying to goad Sasarai. I told you, Didoro, they are not dolls but eternal beauties. You could never understand, for you dabble in the incorrect way of art. Like I told you many times before, my art is true art. Not your repugnant version of your so-called art, bit back Sasarai. Hey, calm down, Sasarai, my man, I was just pulling your wooden leg, spoke Didoro with his signature smirk. Shut up, replied Sasarai, who was watching something from the corner of his eyes. It was a dark shadow walking among the trees on the sides of the road. It had been following him for the last half hour. The figure was currently walking at an even pace, his steps mimicking those of Didoro's. Didoro, go on ahead of me. I'll catch up, spoke Sasarai. Didoro giving him a curious look, but shrugged it off and headed toward the inn up ahead. Sasarai trekked his way into the forest, passed by all the green trees on his way, and he beheld a figure dressed in a black cloak with a head which obscured most of his face. You've been following me, stated Sasarai. The figure didn't make any movement or facial expression. I can feel that you don't want anything to do with Didoro. You want something from me. Yes, Sasarai, spoke the cloaked individual neutrally. He removed his hood, allowing Sasarai to take in his image. He had spiky blonde hair with chin-length bangs that hugged the sides of his face, and a single bang fell between his eyes and parted at the bridge of his nose, and he had a low ponytail which were wrapped halfway with bandages. He had a narrow face and narrow eyes which were slightly rounded, and he had a pair of Sharingan in each of his sockets. I've been meaning to meet with you for a while. Sakurai chuckled a little. He knew this person, and he recognized him easily. Ryu Yokaze. To what do I owe the pleasure? Said Sakurai, who was amused at the scene. As I said, I've been meaning to meet with you. Continued Naruto emotionlessly. There is something I want your help with. And that is? Questioned Sakurai. Seeing as how I'm the newest member of the Akatsuki, I wish to help expand the organization's influence, and I was told you were the best person to help me. Said Ryu blankly. Sakurai was not fooled. He could tell there was some ulterior motive behind Yokaze's words. Most members didn't care for Akatsuki's ultimate goal, so they just stuck around for no apparent reason. You can cut the act. Tell me what you really want, as I hate to be kept waiting. Spoke Sakurai, who was slightly annoyed. Cunning would be the greatest word to describe you. Complimented Naruto. Naruto's right index finger started to glow blue with his chakra. He pressed his finger into the ground, and slowly a map of the shinobi world was carved into the ground. Sakurai instantly recognized the Tekoku Fuin, hand-carving seal. I wish for spies to be set up within each of the 5 great shinobi nations so they can relay information to me, and also act as sleeper agents. Clarified Naruto as he highlighted the 5 main countries that each had the strongest ninja villages. Now I see why you came to me. Deadpan Sakurai as he scoured over the map. But tell me, what are you planning with the villages? Something that doesn't really involve you, but what I said earlier about aiding the Akatsuki's plans was the truth. In a way. Answered Naruto. A plan on this scale can't be easy. And what do I get out of this? Queried Sakurai. Ryu stared at him blankly, betraying little emotion. Ryu tucked his left hand into one of his coat's inner pockets. He removed a scroll bound with twine with the kanji for human on it. Sakurai eyed the scroll for a second, not sure what to think of it. This scroll contains the bodies of several shinobi who I believe would be very valuable to you. Clarified Naruto as he stared at Sakurai blankly. The puppet master within his puppet armor didn't make any motion of life. I am aware that you can create human puppets from the bodies of real people, and they can retain their abilities from life, and can be used in death in the body of a wooden machination. And may I ask, what is in the scroll? Questioned Sakurai. He wanted to know what was within that scroll and how could it benefit him. This scroll contains the corpses of shinobi of Konoha. Before I came here, I took the liberty of ambushing several teams of Konoha nin with the Land of Fire and stored their bodies within the scroll. Most are just average ninja cannon fodder, but the others are corpses of Yamanaka, Obarame and Nara nin. Spoke Ryu. From within his human puppet, Sakurai gave a small smirk. Members from 3 strong clans of the Hidden Leaf Village, he could only imagine the art he could create with their bodies. Very good. I'll help you. Since the price is right. Replied Sakurai as his puppet removed his Akatsuki cloak. And what Ryu saw was the stout puppet opening up its shell was a human head whose mouth was closed, and the puppet slumped to the ground as a dark-clothed figure rose from it. I guess you don't want to show me your face. Stated Naruto. Yeah. If you don't mind. Spoke Sakurai, and Ryu noted that his voice was less gruffer and sounded younger. From the dark cloth came a hand with a scroll in it, and Ryu noticed Sakurai's Akatsuki ring, which linked him to the Geto Mizo. In the manga and anime the ring's purposes are unknown, so this is added. Just go with the flow. Naruto handed the human scroll to Sakurai, and Sakurai handed him a jutsu scroll. That scroll contains a jutsu that allows you to bury away your targets' memories, and if you want you can restore their memories from any place in the world. The scroll can clarify the rest. Clarified Sakurai as he shrunk back into his human puppet. Ryu nodded at the former Suna shinobi. The blonde was going to use genjutsu to enslave the minds of certain shinobi from each major village and turn them into his little mice. If you want I can continue to help you, for the right price. And when you mean price, you actually mean fresh corpses and preferably ones with Keki Genkai. Replied Naruto, and Sakurai, who was now in his scorpion-like puppet, nodded with his puppet's head. Pleasure doing business with you and thank you for your cooperation. Spoke Naruto, and before Sakurai's eyes Ryu dispersed into a cloud of bats and flew away. Sakurai watched as the flying mammals departed. Sakurai had learned something very interesting today. Ryu Yokaze was a very interesting person. Yo, Sakurai, my man, what's keeping ya? grunted Deidara as he appeared from behind Sasarai. The clay user had been curious about what happened to his partner. Of course, he didn't care what happened to the Suna shinobi, but he also didn't want to get in trouble with the leader of the organization. "Shut up, Deidara," spoke Sasarai as he shuffled past Deidara. "You're annoying." Deidara would have face-faulted at what Sasarai said, but the blonde nin was used to the man's abuse ever since he joined the Akatsuki. Both members started the trek along the road they were originally walking. But Sasarai couldn't help but think about Rya's plans. What was the dragon planning? And what consequence would he bring with it? In Kanahagakure, Tsunade Senju was tending to her work as the Hokage, signing off on missions and handling any trade the village had with neighboring towns and cities in the Land of Fire. The Fire Deo had been concerned recently. He and his council were doubting Konoha's strength. And he found out about the yokais and dancing. Phantom incidents was unknown, but Tsunade had a wild guess that it was Danzo, that cunning old badger. In fact, he had disappeared a few weeks ago only to reappear out of nowhere. Where did he go? And who did he see? But she could guess that Danzo supplied the Deo with the information on Konoha's infiltration, so he could use the opportunity to oust her as Hokage. Danzo had to be watched carefully. She needed to watch him, and his movements. You never really knew what he was plotting, but Tsunade also knew that Danzo loved the village more than anything. She remembered one of the lessons that Sarutobi gave to her as her time as his student. "Judge us not by our methods, but what we seek to accomplish." Which basically translated into questioning a person's methods, but not their motives. And that lesson still confused her to this day, because it sounded like the opposite of what it was supposed to mean. Her thoughts then traveled to the Aburame clan, who would be holding Shino's funeral tomorrow. His death was a major blow to the Aburame, who had lost one their most promising ninja. Shikamaru and Neji were both being foolish. At the time, they had no clue of what the enemy could do, and they just rushed ahead, without a second thought. He used to be like that, and now she could still remember the blonde to the finest detail. But she couldn't dwell on the past. If she thought about it too much, it would just hurt her in the end. She then heard something strange behind her. She thought nothing of it, but she heard it again, where she turned around in her chair and saw a jet black crow, perched on the windowsill with a scroll tied to its back. It was currently pecking at her window, to get her attention. She got up from her chair and opened the window, where the crow flew in and roosted itself on her desk. She walked over and untied the scroll from its back. She unbound the flimsy paper and read its contents. It was a message, a very frustratingly short and near useless message, and she didn't know who sent it. She looked back at the crow, where it flew out through the window and into the sky, where it was beginning to darken as night was encroaching. She threw the scroll back on her desk, where its contents were visible to the world. Nobody's like him may look like they respond emotionally, but this is, in fact, a ruse. Nobody's like him have no emotions. But he remembers what his was like. That's what makes him special, and he knows very well how to injure another's emotions. Beware of him. She had no idea of what to make of the message. It was near gibberish, and who was this nobody, and he could injure another's emotions? What the hell did that mean? She sighed. Things have been changing a lot, and she could feel that someone was making the pieces of the puzzle fall into place. However, she couldn't help but feel that Yokei's was connected to it somehow. Konan was currently sitting in her hotel room in Kirigakure. The Mizukage was kind enough to pay for the service herself. It had been a day since Ma Ryu left for some business, and the blonde had yet to return. Konan would be lying if she said that she wasn't worried about him. They had been partners for some time, and she was the only person in the world aside from Zetsu. Did he really count as a person? Nah, forget it, but she was the only person who could claim that she knew Yokei's the best. She had yet to see all of his true powers yet. And the only other things she knew about his abilities were those that were mentioned in the bingo books. But personality-wise, she knew nothing about him other than how he liked to train and increase his jutsu arsenal. She knew nothing about him, and yet she knew everything about him. From spending years with Nagato and being his partner, Konan can see emotions without someone forming facial expressions. But when she talked to Ryu, she couldn't see nor feel any emotion. It seemed like she talked through him and not to him. However, she knew one thing that she could see and feel was his pain. It practically radiated off him. He was always in pain, and she would cause more pain by asking him what caused it. His pain is greater than Nagato's. That was something she knew about Ryu Yokei's. She didn't know the history of Madara Uchiha well. The only thing she did know was his time in Kanahagakure and his defection from said village and his battle with Hashirama Senju. And somehow she felt sad because she didn't know how to ease his pain. Maybe he was trying to achieve the dream world because he wanted to relieve himself of his anguish. She gave up thinking on it. Nothing was going to happen when you sit around thinking about it. She got up from her seat on the chair and left her hotel room and went out exploring Kirigakure. Two men were standing opposite each other in a small, but not too small field. The grass swayed with the winds, currents, and the light in the sky was darkening quickly, signaling that night was coming and the moon would be at its peak. These two men were wearing black cloaks, however one had red clouds on his cloak, and he carried around a massive, bandaged sword that slightly resembled a claymore. He had blue skin and gills on his cheekbones, jagged, dagger-like teeth and blue hair, along with beady eyes. This was Kasami Hoshigaki, the Kirigakure no Kajin, monster of the hidden mist, and one of the famous 7 ninja swordsmen of the mist. Kasami was reputed to be the most powerful member amongst the swordsmen, and his massive chakra reserves have earned him the moniker of Tailed Beast, without a tail. Kasami was not someone you should take lightly, otherwise he'll flay your body around like a shark. The other person was Ryu Yokaze, the Yokaze no Ryu, Dragon of the Night Wind. A man whose fame had spread to the entire shinobi world in little over a month. Ryu was regarded as an infiltration and assassination master and easily an S-rank shinobi and the most powerful person outside the Uchiha clan to wield the Sharingan. Ryu was tall and his golden blonde, spiky locks reminded people of the sun. He was considered very handsome by the women who saw his face, and he mainly wore black attire, which gave rise to his other moniker, Koro Ryu, Black Dragon. Like his fellow Akatsuki member, Ryu wore a black cloak although it lacked the clouds and instead had a hood with drawstrings. Shall we get started, Ryu? Samehata is curious about how your chakra tastes like? Grinned Kasami, who hefted his massive sword off his back. Ryu didn't say anything except a sword slid out of his loose sleeve and into his black gloved hand. He twirled the blade around, getting used to its weight. It was his signature weapon. The Tonbagari no Tsurugi, dragonfly cutting sword. Naruto would also have to hold back to avoid killing Kasami, and it won't be like last time where he fought the Konoha nins. He was merely playing around. But he had to be careful since Kaisam's sword could absorb chakra. Only one drawback, spoke Naruto, gaining Kaisam's attention. No killing. Kasami frowned at that, but then thought about what pain would do to him. Although the leader accepted the fact that Kakazu would kill his partners except for Haiden, he was pretty sure that the organization wouldn't find another person like Ryu. So Kasami just went with the flow. The shark man stabbed his sword into the ground and started forming hand seals for a B-rank jutsu. Sutan, Bakasui Shako, water release, exploding water colliding wave. Kasami spat out an enormous volume of water, aimed at Naruto, that quickly flooded the area. Ryu jumped in the air to avoid the collision course of the wave. He plans to gain advantage of the environment by flooding the area with water, thereby reducing the chakra cost of his water techniques, and giving him the option of submerged combat. It didn't matter if he hit me or not, he just needed a large water source, and because of this, my fire techniques will now be near useless unless I combine them with my wind jutsu, increasing its power and heat, otherwise the water will just smother my flames. Not only that, Samehata can absorb chakra, so my masked beasts are near useless against Kaizams, they are made of chakra. Deduced Naruto as he landed on the water. He also noticed that the water was being freely manipulated to cover the field, as many of the trees was flood, but beyond that there was nothing but ground. Kasami was truly the closest person to match the Nidaime Hokage in water release. Granted, he couldn't take the moisture out of the air to form his techniques. With his Sharingan, Naruto scoured among the life-giving liquid searching for his opponent. However, it was difficult seeing as the water was made from chakra. Kasami meanwhile was underwater forming hand seals for a jutsu. Sutan, Gashakazame, water release, 5 feeding sharks. Kasami held out his hand and used his chakra to form 5 sharks made of water, and aimed it at Ryu, where they glided through the water with impressive speed. Naruto, sensing something coming at him, looked down into the water and saw a water shark with serrated teeth rocketing towards him. Naruto took a step back and allowed the shark to graze past him without much harm. He then felt a second presence where another shark burst from the water, where he strafed away from his previous position. Using his chakra, he rolled out of the way of another shark. He felt 2 other chakra signatures coming at him from 2 sides. He jumped into the air and avoided the sharks, where he prepared the Tonbagari to stab one of the sharks. And he did just that, where he successfully stabbed one of the sharks in the nose, where it dissipated upon contact with the water-flooded field surface. He could sense a shark coming at him via propelling itself from the water and soaring at him like a torpedo. He twirled the Tonbagari and stabbed the other shark, where it also dispersed into water. However, his troubles weren't over as the two sharks started regenerating by using the water that Kasami created. Kasami below the water grinned. Even if the sharks dispersed into water, they could regenerate their bodies by using the water. Ryu jumped away from another shark, but instead he felt his leg crushed into between two mighty jaws where he looked down to see one of the newly regenerated sharks munching on his leg where it bled a little, but the wound wasn't that bad that it could cause injury. Another shark flew from the water and hit Naruto in the chest where he felt the air in his lungs leave. He's lucky that his rib cage wasn't broken. The Sharingan wielder flew back a little and fell into the water, where one of the 5 sharks latched onto his wounded leg, earning a silenced yelp from the blonde as he was dragged into the water. Kasami frowned from his position on the miniature ocean bed. Was that really all Ryu could do considering all the hype about him? Even if I attacked the sharks they would just regenerate, therefore I must attack Kasami, thought Naruto. He sealed his Tonbaguri and went through Soe hand seals while fighting off the pain in his leg and holding his breath. He would have to use a stronger version of a wind jutsu, because if he used a lightning jutsu underwater he would just hurt himself along with Kasami. Futon, Swaisuke Ajiki Hantiu Purita, wind release, chasing prey hunting predator, yelled Naruto as he blew out numerous wind rabbits, but along with them were wind wolves following them. Kasami, seeing the deadly wind rabbits and wolves, swam away like shark, but he too found out that like his sharks the rabbits and the wolves were following him. While Kasami was distracted, Naruto punched the water shark in the nose. The carnivorous fish released him from its crushing jaws, allowing Naruto to swim to the surface. Naruto's head breached the water and he started gulping for air. He channeled chakra through his body, allowing him to balance himself on the water. He stared down into the blue liquid and saw Kasami doing his best to get away from the eviscerating wind animals that were piercing the dense water. From behind, a water shark attacked Ryu, but of course Naruto sensed it and kicked the shark away with his good leg, and he went through some hand seals. Reitan, Kanchkia lightning release, wave of inspiration, yelled Naruto as he slammed his hands against the small ocean, where electricity burst forth, arcing about and traveling through the water. Kasami didn't and couldn't see the lightning coming, for it was traveling too fast. And when the lightning made impact, it turned Kaizam's environmental advantage into a disadvantage as the lightning coursed through his body and numbed his senses. His water sharks also were not able to escape from the lightning, where they dispersed in the water, unable to regenerate. Kaizam's body was so numbed that he was left open to attack from Ryu's wind. Since lightning is weak against wind, the lightning currents did very little to the wind rabbits and wolves. When the rabbits HT Kasami tearing his sides and body, the wolves would come, also inflicting even more damage to the man. As the onslaught continued, Kasami started revoking his doubts about Ryu. Since he used his own jutsu and environment against him and followed up with an attack after being weakened from his initial technique. Naruto took the time to heal his leg with medical ninjutsu. Madara taught him how to use it, but it was Naruto's worst subject. He wasn't even close to matching Hashirama Senju's prowess in healing, nor was he as good as Tsunade. But he knew enough to get him out of trouble. When Naruto was done, the wounds were fully healed, and his natural healing ability took care of the rest. Although he did frown at the torn holes in his pants where the shark bit him. When Naruto looked up, he saw a floating mass on the surface of the water, which he guessed was Kasami, who was bloody and torn up. Naruto walked up to Kasami and inspected his wounds. He could sense that Kasami was alive, since his chakra signature had yet to disappear and Naruto had to hand it to him. He was a tough bastard. He turned the shark man over with his foot. But instead he found a large bandaged claymore, slice him diagonally across the chest and then shred him horizontally. Blood immediately exploded from the slashes on Naruto's chest, where he fell back and impacted against the water. Make sure your target is knocked out before you check if he's alright, advised Kasami as he stood up on the water with his injuries being healed by Samehada. But suddenly Naruto exploded in a plume of smoke, revealing a broken log drifting on the water. Kasami frowned and turned his head in different directions, looking for the black-cloaked blonde. And he found him to his left with his arms crossed and an emotionless visage on his features. And always have a getaway plan if your opponent is waiting to strike, spoke Naruto. Kasami grinned, since the blonde was right. The former Kiri-nin hasn't had this much fun in ages, and he could tell Samehada was excited, given that it made a gurgling sound when the sword was excited. Haha, this is fun, quipped Kasami. We should do this more often, suggested the shark man. Naruto didn't respond, but instead unsealed the Tonbaguri, where he held it in his right hand. Nice sword you have there, too bad mine is bigger, jested Kasami, hoping to throw Ryu off balance. Unfortunately, it failed because Naruto was unperturbed. Both fighters fell into a sword stance. Kasami holding his with two hands facing in front of him, while Naruto held his with two hands by the side of his head ready to strike like a cobra. Both men charged forward at each other, with impressive speed. And their swords both met with a loud clank. And there it started a large kenjutsu duel. Whenever Kasami tried to hit him from the side, Ryu would block it and use the block to his advantage, where he would use his natural agility to bypass Kaisam's defenses. But Kasami used his hulking mass to keep Naruto away. And the blonde was impressed since the shark man could wield that sword like a toothpick, considering its size. "Hey, you're pretty good," complimented Kasami as he and Ryu locked swords. Naruto didn't answer and instead stared at Kasami, who was unafraid of the Sharingan in man's eyes. Naruto knew that genjutsu might not affect Kasami since the swordsman had a symbiotic relationship with his sword, so Samehada might feed chakra to Kasami, breaking him from Genjutsu. Kasami performed a leg sweep to topple Naruto, but the blonde jumped in the air to avoid it, where Kasami swept Samehada in a full circle and smacked Naruto away from him, who perfectly positioned his sword to block it, where he flew back from the impact. Kasami, not one to be undone, chased after the blonde and tried to cleave Naruto's head with Samehada, but the blonde blocked Samehada with his Tonbaguri and fell to one knee from the strength put into the slash. Despite Naruto's strength from training under Madara, it wasn't enough for Kasami, who was pressing down on his claymore. Naruto felt the sword encroaching closer to his shoulder. He couldn't kick Kasami or unbalance him. So he prepared justice by forming two hand seals with difficulty, since trying to keep Kasami from shredding his shoulder was something hard. "Okamisha Onarai," wolf-piercing howl yelled Naruto in his mind as Samehada came in contact with his shoulder. And at the same time, Kasami pulled Samehada towards him, shredding Naruto's shoulder, causing blood to spill into the water. And Naruto at the same time prepared chakra in his throat and emitted a loud howl that sounded like a bell ringing and a wolf howl at the same time, where a beam of chakra surrounded by sound wave-like rings hit Kasami in the chest, cracking most of his ribs and sent him hurtling away. Naruto held his bleeding shoulder with his left hand, causing him to grimace, and he lamented over his now ruined cloak. He sealed the Tonbaguri and applied medical ninjutsu to his shoulder, which was still functioning. Naruto also grinned. Kasami was going to be a tough opponent since the swordsman's healing ability was quite troublesome. If there was one thing Naruto loved, it was holding back against strong opponents. He loved getting wounded. Why? It serves as a reminder that he is still human and can still die. Immortality sucks in his opinion. When you fight, you have no motive to why you fight except for a few other reasons. But when you fight and your life is on the line, that's when Naruto has the most fun. Kasami was floating on the surface on the water. He felt like he had been kicked by 12 donkeys and continued to be kicked. To Kasami, it seems as if Ryu was around at his level of power. And he had now found his new favorite hobby: fighting Ryu. He grimaced when he moved his torso. He felt lucky to even have his chest at all. Right now Samehada was supplying him chakra to heal his cracked ribs. He got up on both feet and prepared to charge at Naruto again, while Ryu did the same. Naruto unsealed the Tonbaguri and fell into another stance. He felt some slight pain coming from his right shoulder, but he brushed it off. Sharks are opportunistic. Any sign of weakness and they'll attack. Both men charged at each other, intent on continuing their kenjutsu brawl. Although Kasami had to be careful to avoid Ryu's mouth, if he wanted to be hit by that shockwave-like technique, he needed to watch out for Dragon's mouth. And Kaisam's fears were right, as his opponent kept firing the howling shockwave, which was decimating the trees around them. Kasami, being smart, scraped his sword against the water, sprawling it everywhere, where it blinded Ryu temporarily, and Kasami used the opportunity to lay down some punishment on Yosuke's. He punched him in the gut, headbutted him and slammed his foot down on Ryu's leg. However, all those attacks did little to Naruto. From all the times he was the White Zetsu's punching has caused his fortitude to skyrocket, where he was able to shrug off various hits and kicks, and his healing ability helped him greatly in that department. Kasami detected something coming off from Samehada. It was a strange feeling, something which the sword hadn't felt. "Samehada's in pain?" questioned Kazama silently. "Is it coming from the Yokaza's sword? What is that blade?" Naruto took advantage of Kasami gathering his thoughts. Roundhouse kicked him in the stomach and slashed him diagonally across the chest. Kasami, however, was able to stave away from the slash, but did receive a large cut on his across his torso, which left the shark man in a stupor. "His sword didn't even touch me, so where did this cut come from?" thought Kasami. The wound wasn't too bad and Samehada wouldn't bother healing it. Naruto performed a flying double kick on Kasami, who blocked it with same hata and pushed him away, causing Naruto to fly back several meters. But what Hoshigaki didn't expect was Naruto to boomerang the Tonbaguri, which was surrounded by a wind aura. Kasami deflected the sword as it came flying towards him, where he watched fly off somewhere. When he turned around, he found Rya's fist inching itself closer to his stomach, where it made impact, and Kasami keeled over from the force of the punch. Naruto smirked in victory. That jutsu was the Kodo Hoku, Soaring Hawk. Similar to the Hien, the Kodo Hoku surrounds whatever bladed weapon in a wind aura, where it can literally fly between enemies and rip them apart. It could also be used as a distraction should it fail, and it would always return to the jutsu caster, and better yet required no hand seals, only mastery of the Hien. The Tonbaguri with its wind aura in a matter of seconds returned to Naruto's hands, where the blonde twirled around Kaizam and severed the tendons in his legs, preventing him from moving. Kasami swung same hata behind him in hopes of hitting Ryu. But Naruto jumped away to safety. So far Naruto was loving this. When he looked up, he noticed the sun was setting and the moon would be following it soon. "I have to compliment you, Ryu," spoke Kasami, whose tendons were being healed by same hata. "You're a lot stronger than I originally thought." Naruto remained emotionless. Because he wanted Kasami alive, so he couldn't kill him, and Nagato wouldn't approve of such a thing either. "Sutan Fukugafu Shojikia, water release, shark tornado shockwave," yelled Kasami as he finished going through the jutsu's hand seals. And literally a tornado made of water, sharks appeared that were as tall as the trees around them started spiraling in on Naruto. The sharks had the added benefit of tearing any individual caught in the spiral. The blonde did what any normal person wouldn't do. He rocketed straight at the water shark tornado. He threw the Tonbaguri and used the Kodo Hoku to have it spiral around and try out hit Kasami while he dealt with the tornado. Naruto weaved some hand seals for a wind jutsu, which hold back the shark tornado or disrupt it completely. "Futon, Hurricane Date wind release, hurricane striking wall," roared Naruto as he held out his hands as a small hurricane appeared and met the shark tornado head on, where a loud crash was heard. Since wind wasn't weak against water, and water isn't weak against wind either, it was practically a stalemate. Naruto grasped his right arm with his left and started gathering chakra in his right hand and made sure Kasami didn't see him using this jutsu. He never knew if his hurricane or Kaizam's sharknado would win in their power battle, and he didn't want to be ripped into pieces. And soon a loud screeching bell-like sound was heard throughout the field. In Naruto's hand was a white Rasengan with 4 wind blades circling around it. He cocked back the Rasen Shuriken and threw it at the 2 spiraling jutsus, and when it made impact, a dome of small wind blades was seen shredding the hurricane and the sharknado. He could sense that Kasami was out of the blast radius, so he probable future pawn would be unharmed. Naruto himself was trying to stay on his feet and keep the water out of his eyes. His cloak billowed violently and his loose sleeves were whipping the air under the force of the wind. Kasami himself was trying to stay on his feet while fighting off a single blade surrounded by a wind aura. Around that time Zetsu melded out of a tree to observe the fight. The plant man had not watching the fight from the beginning, but the original Naruto kept his attention preoccupied. Zetsu decided to keep to himself. Naruto would always have a way of overhearing the conversation the 2 Zetsus had when in close proximity. "Naruto is sure holding back," commented White Zetsu. "Although he won't be holding back as much when the moon rises," spoke Black Zetsu. "What do you mean?" asked White Zetsu. "You've forgotten, haven't you?" queried Black Zetsu while the white half squeaked in reply. "Well, soon you will see what I mean." Soon the wind dome died down and the area wasn't damaged and the water returned to its original shape. Naruto saw the Tonbaguri sailing towards and he grasped the sword in his right hand when it returned to him. Kasami meanwhile was panting a little but otherwise alright. "That sword is fucking annoying," though Kasami as he regained himself. But still, while the sword was annoying, the fight was too fun. Kasami hadn't felt so alive in a long time. But unfortunately for him, he was unaware that the battle would be ending soon. "Now I see why Obito lauds you so much," spoke Naruto emotionlessly to Kasami. "You're truly someone worthy of strength." "And I would low minus," but Naruto stopped in his sentence when he felt a light radiate over him. He had finally noticed that the sun had set, and a new light was replaced with it. When Naruto looked behind him, he thought he saw a pale white goddess watching over him like a guardian. And he was close, but not too far off. The full moon was now clearly visible in the sky, its light shining down on the darkness. Kasami was confused. Why was Ryu interested in the moon so much? Can you hear its euphoria? Asked Naruto, who had yet to take his red eyes off the moon. The moon. Someday I will hold it in my grasp, whispered Naruto. Kasami didn't hear Naruto's words, but he did hear something. I'm afraid that I gave grown tired from this battle, Kasami, said Ryu. I'm afraid I have to end it now. Kasami raised his eyebrow in curiosity. Ryu had yet to turn and face him. And what was he babbling on about? Here it comes, spoke Black Zetsu. Naruto sealed the Tonbaguri into his right wrist seal, and went through some hand seals to activate a special transformation. Dog, tiger, snake, rat, horse, dragon, monkey, ramox, or dragon, thought Naruto as he weaved together the hand seals. Yabanana Basaka Henkin, Bestial Berserker transformation, whispered Naruto. Kasami felt something flow from Samehada and it felt like fear. What was Ryu doing? Kasami received his answer where he saw something change in Ryu's appearance. Naruto felt an overwhelming power flow through him. He had only used this mode once before, and now was his second time using it. His appearance began to change. His ears became pointed like a wolf's, his canine became bared and more fang-like, and his hair became manic and wild where his ponytail tore through the bandages, holding it where it was now loose and free, and his hair slightly resembled a lion's mane. The sclera in his eyes turned black and his pupils became slits. His muscles became slightly larger, but still kept their lean look. And a scar like X sprouted between his eyes, which ended below his cheekbones and near his hairline. Naruto breathed in a large amount of air in content, as if nothing in the world could affect him. That is the Banana Basaka Henkin, a special mode created by the Wolf Tribe, and can be learned by their summoners, clarified Black Zetsu. While Zetsu whistled in astonishment, he could feel the raw and wild chakra pulsing through Naruto. What does it do? Asked White Zetsu. It's similar to Sage mode in that it allows one to absorb natural energy. However, this mode is reliant on a person's own natural energy from within them. They look inside their core and stabilize their own natural energy and coalesce it within their chakra, instead of relying on a person's surroundings. It was created by the Wolf Tribe when a clan of shinobi received a power from the Ryushi Cave that allowed them access to powers similar to Sage mode. However, any person of that clan was mentally unstable, and their power was inferior to that of Sage mode. So the wolves created their own power to bestow on their summoners superior to the clan's Sage transformation but still inferior to Sage mode, and the Banana Basaka Henkin was created, explained Black Zetsu. So Naruto's powers are triple to what they originally were, stated White Zetsu, where the black half answered him with a grunt. However, there is one deadly side effect to this power, spoke Black Zetsu too, its white counterpart. The form brings out the person's purest instincts and savage impulses, and while Naruto is under the influence of the transformation, he will be more wild, primal and uncontrollable. The transformation brings out the person's animalistic instincts and makes it surface in the transformation. So he is deadliest while under the transformation's effects, stated White Zetsu. Yes. Though he will still have some level of control, but we should still be wary. He might cause some collateral damage to everything around him, and when he's angry he'll destroy everything around him. With Naruto, he was still staring at the moon as if drowsily. His Sharingan red matched the black of his sclera. He brought his hand up to his face and began opening and closing it. He grabbed his cloak and threw it off him, insert fangirl squeal, where his lean torso was showcased to the world. He turned to look at Kasami, who was a little unnerved with those black and red eyes. Naruto had yet to say anything. The wind was flowing wildly while his hair moved with it. Kasami noticed something on left side of his chest. It was a scar that looked like a lightning bolt struck it over where high here should be. And without warning, Naruto roared like a beast and flew at Kasami, who barely brought Samehada up in time to block the attack, and not only that, he was pushed back tremendously where the shark man had trouble staying on his feet. He pushed Ryu, who snarled at the former Kirinin, and charged again at the S-ranked shinobi. Kasami was completely put on the defensive. Ryu's attacks were now wild and unpredictable. He didn't notice the punch aimed for the left side of his temple, which he narrowly ducked under, but he didn't fail to register the kick coming into contact with his chin, which launched him into the air where Naruto followed after him. Ryu performed the Cage Bio, Shadow of the Dancing Leaf, to match Kaizam's movements in the air, where the bestial man somersaulted and brought his elbow down on Kaizam's head, causing him to crash into the miniature ocean. Naruto followed right behind Kaizam's plummet and roared all the way. And when Kasami touched the water bed, he was punched in the gut by Naruto. The punch was so powerful that all the water around them created a small pocket of air inside the small ocean. Naruto latched his hand around Kaizam's head and threw his face across the ground, causing a large skid trail where Kaizam's head was. The shark man was wrecked with pain and his face was bloody, so this was Ryu's special and unique power. The water he had summoned was dispersing into droplets around him, no longer holding shape. Zetsu was watching everything transpire, and he could detect that something was wrong. He's still holding back even under the influence of the beast. Spoke Black Zetsu, because if Ryu wanted someone dead while using his beast mode, then Kasami would be dead already. Naruto unsealed the Tonbaguri and launched himself at Kasami, where he prepared to stab him. "Come on!" yelled Naruto. Just because he was more manic didn't mean he couldn't utter intelligent language. "I will leave you with nothing." Naruto threw the Tonbaguri where the wind aura carried it and tried to wound Kasami while Naruto was going through hand seals faster than before. "Katan, Korai Honotsum, Fire Release, Dark Flame Claw," growled Naruto as 3 columns of flame shaped like a crescent moons, as tall as large trees, streaked across the ground toward Kasami, who had finally regained himself. When he got up on his feet, he registered 3 flame-like claws and a wind sword heading towards him. With all his speed, Kasami sliced through the flame claws, but he couldn't escape the wind sword, where he received a deep cut on his side. He dropped to one knee and held himself on the ground. When he looked up, he saw Ryu standing over him like a predator. And he was emitting a growling sound. Maybe fighting a guy who supposedly claims that he's Madara Uchiha wasn't a good idea, after all, thought Kasami. He got kneed in the face, which made him fall to the ground and drop Samehada. "I want to see you die fighting," snarled Naruto as he started pounding Kaizam's face with his fist. "All will be lost to you," said Naruto. He felt something gnawing on his right arm and saw Samehada. The sword was unbandaged, and it now had a mouth at its tip. Naruto got off Kasami and threw Samehada away. Naruto huffed and was about to return beating Kasami, when he received a large glob of water, smack him in the face and sent him skidding back a distance. "Even when I put as much chakra as I could into that technique, he looks unfazed," thought Kasami as he picked himself up. While in beast mode, Naruto doesn't feel pain and his already amazing healing ability doubles. "Yes, that's more like it, fight back," shouted Naruto. He performed some hand seals and prepared a lightning jutsu. "Reitan, Hakarki Hakushu, lightning release, thunderclap," yelled Ryu as a bolt of lightning fell from the sky, hitting Kasami and causing a bright light. When he looked back at Kasami, he saw that Samehada was protecting him from the bolt of lightning. Naruto growled bestially. That sword is getting pretty annoying, and it was healing Kaizam's wounds with the chakra it had devoured. Naruto made an all too familiar hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. And a perfect clone of the beast Naruto appeared. The breeze threw hand seals, preparing a fire jutsu. Katan Goryuka no Jutsu, Fire Release, Great Dragon Fire Technique. And blew out a large amount of fire, chakra in the shape of a dragon head flying towards Kasami, who brought up Samehada to protect himself from the fire, despite how Samehada doesn't like fire chakra. To Kasami, this was getting ridiculous. And from now he's never fighting Ryu again. He'd rather get castrated than fight Ryu again. At first it was fun, but when the moon rose of the horizon, everything changed. Kasami was the one being dominated, and he could venture a guess that Ryu can defeat Itachi. Hell, he now knows that Yosuke has been holding back during the entire fight. And suddenly out of the flames came the original Ryu soaring towards Kaizam, with the Tonbaguri in hand. He grasped the hilt of Samehada and performed a spinning heel kick on Kaizam's face, taking out several of his teeth. Naruto, still grasping Samehada in his left hand, went to attack Kasami with his own sword. Samehada in retaliation created spikes from its hilt to force Ryu to let go of it. But it did little, as Naruto was now immune to pain. And with the Tonbaguri and the Samehada, Naruto laid waste to Kasami. He slashed and cut him with the Tonbaguri and shredded and tore him with Samehada in a wild flurry, with Naruto roaring throughout it. And with a double strike to the chest, Kasami coughed up blood, crashed to the floor, his body a bloody mess. He was breathing harshly and his blood stained the dirty wet ground. Naruto stood over him with a blank look, still wielding Samehada, which he let go of. He deactivated his bestial berserker transformation and knelt down next to the dying Kasami, whose cloak was torn, and nothing but mere remnants of cloth. Naruto made 3 hand seals for a handy medical jutsu. Ketsuki Hanta Riden no Jutsu, blood body return technique, and in a few seconds all the blood Kasami had lost was returning to his wounds and injuries. But the wounds were still open and needed to be healed quickly. Samehada approached its master and for the final time during the fight, it healed all of his wounds and for the final time during the fight, it healed all of his wounds by transferring chakra. Ryu unsealed a scroll from his left wrist seal and ink from his right wrist seal and started writing a message. He rolled up the scroll and dumped it on Kaizam's unconscious body. And with that he left the field. And Zetsu returning to the original Naruto's location. And no one there saw the crow perched on a tree watching the whole fight, with its Sharingan eyes. It flew off to an unknown place letting out a loud caw. When it arrived to its intended point of arrival, someone was writing on a scroll and tied the scroll to the back of the crow where it flew off to their location. End of chapter 9.